Hey, this is Sabrina, Monarch of Monarch Astrology and Magic of the Spheres podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like this video, leave a comment at some point and let me know what resonates with you, and subscribe to my channel. So we have a new moon in Virgo, September 14th, 2023. And what I felt was significant about this new moon, here's a chart where I took out many of the planets, but we have the new moon in Virgo and it's forming a grand Earth trine with Pluto and Capricorn and Uranus and Taurus, Jupiter also, which I took out, my bad. And then the sun and moon, the new moon, is also opposite Neptune and Pisces. So this lunation forms major aspects to every single transpersonal planet, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And the transpersonal planets represent beyond or mystical forces. They represent the unseen. They're planets that we can't see without a telescope, and they also correspond with forces in reality that require some level of initiation to, open into. Or, I mean, some people have, it naturally, but it's like, if you have any kind of clairvoyance or clairaudience or claircognizance, you see beyond, you feel the deeper undercurrents, like all of those kind of deeper forms of sight beyond what we can concretely, collectively agree is like here and tangible, are things that connect to the outer planets. So why I think this is interesting with the new moon in Virgo is that Virgo can be such a practical in the details of the earth element, like what's here, what's real, what can I touch, what can I see? And that's not the only side of Virgo. Of course, Virgo can be things like energy work and things like witchcraft and like these crafts that relate to the unseen. It's not unheard of inside of Virgo, but there is a way that we've been dealing in our society with like a pretty long history of a split between spirit and matter. And Virgo and Pisces is one place that we really see the consequences or the behaviors or the patterns of that split play out. So what I'm going to be suggesting in my kind of overview and take about this transit is that there is a certain kind of magic or presence or beyond quality that we can weave and bring back into the everyday, right? Or that the more present, like actually present, exquisitely present we become with what is actually here right now and allow it to open, like to open inside of it, that we can encounter that which we're seeking, right? That it's not something so beyond or so divorced from the present. If to kind of illustrate what I'm saying, think about religion, Judeo-Christian religion, and the concept of like living a certain life here so that you earn heaven, right? Or that if you mess up to a degree here, that you earn passage to hell, right? So there's this sense of how, our actions that we're taking and the spiritual destination that it affords us. We also do this in terms of our appraisal of the future and where we kind of invest in a future and see our present as like just something that we have to kind of, go through the motions of in order to gain that desired result, as opposed to bringing heaven into the now, like as opposed to letting your present everyday reality be a fractal of that thing that you are wanting to create. So this is a pattern that many of us can get stuck inside of, this sense that we're kind of trading the drudgery of the current moment for some future promised result. And when I look at that grand Earth trine, what that actually makes me think of is like really setting into motion a lot of momentum, a lot of magic, a lot of deep transformation in our lives, but through pretty everyday little efforts. So inside of this, I have some things prepared that I wrote, also some shares about things that I'm moving through in my own life to kind of make connections between those stories and the transit. And then I'll conclude with some more broad, like for everyone kind of ideas. Though I'm only sharing details and like personal shares that I think are informative or teaching moments and whatnot for the transit. But I don't normally do that to this extent inside of the forecast. But when I saw that grand Earth trine, I just Like it lit up so much for me that I've been experiencing the last few weeks and more. So first, just to reiterate, Virgo is a mutable earth sign. All the mutable signs, Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, Pisces, relate to transitions, right? They're the signs that relate to a season transitioning, like summer turning into fall. And the transitional quality of the sign relates to shaking up stagnant energy and allowing it to move and shift. Which I think is a real quality of magic in some sense too. Like when we're trying to change things or move things, like sometimes it's that mutable energy that allows us to loosen up a situation that feels stuck. But Virgo's a mutable earth sign relating to the smallest and shiftiest details and particulars of physical craft. So these are our routines, our health, and our skills. It's also potentially witchy or magical, like relating to things like herbalism and plants or altar building. Also the whole idea of like sympathies and resonances where certain colors or certain gemstones or certain plants relate to planets and whatnot, like that there's this kind of natural symbolic quality in reality, and that if you want to connect with certain energies, you can connect with their physical counterparts. And inside of Virgo, we can have many different types of relationships to how we relate to the small details of life, right? Sometimes we can feel very overwhelmed by them and create a lot of avoidance patterns around what we feel overwhelmed by. We let things pile up to a point of crisis, then it's a mess, then we don't want to deal with it, and the cycle continues. Or we might be very reverent and in tune with the process and be in a kind of flow state with it. Or you can be like very obsessed about getting everything right and like go on overdrive trying to do everything all the time perfect. So I think that when it comes to like the Virgo detail dimension of life, the work is never finished. You sweep the floor, it gets messy again. It's not about arrival, right? It's funny because that's like the live a good life and get into heaven thing. There's this whole idea of arrival inside of that. But if you imagine that the process is kind of infinite and it keeps going and going and going, it's like, how do you find this beautiful, exquisite flow state inside of that instead of trying to trade your hustle for permanent relaxation, right? How would you relate? How would you slow down and deepen into your routines if the present moment is all that you have? So Virgo, regardless of our relationship to details and to like the little details of our craft that may make us insane at times or that we may love and like really get nerdy about, Virgo is a part of our practice where we end up having to micro calibrate and adjust and course correct, right? It's our relationship to editing and making things better and refining. And I really want to encourage a certain compassion and emotional resilience and like building our capacity to look at like these little details that maybe need to be looked at, to have the capacity to notice that we made a mistake without the fire and brimstone, hellish, like punisher that comes along with that, which again, I'm using this kind of like religious language with the fire and brimstone, but even if you never were religious or didn't grow up with that kind of conditioning, we still in the society often have a way of having those types of very harsh inner voices that make it really difficult to relate to being imperfect. And then to reiterate again, the outer planets, which the new moon is going to be in this tight, grand trine relationship with, represent beyond and transpersonal forces. And I think that's fascinating to think of with Virgo, because Virgo, in Pisces, it's like there isn't this original split of spirit and matter. Early humans or like early human spirituality did see a world full of meaning where rocks and plants and rivers were alive just as well as humans. It was only kind of a later philosophical development that, this kind of life or spiritual life exists in the human and it's our projection onto nature, like an anthropomorphism, right? What if we dial that back and go to this place where, everything is full of meaning, everything's alive? How would we relate to the universe inside of that or relate to the material? So as this new moon has been building up, even just as we've been in Virgo season, I've really been feeling into this magic of the everyday. The realization came into my field again, kind of like an orbit, like it returned to me, that life is cumulatively made of moments. And the most power that I have to affect change is in the present, right? The most power that I have to create is in the present. And these present moments are fractals of eternity, right? So if I really can create that frequency that I'm seeking in the bigger picture in the tiniest fractal, it opens up a flow state. It creates a kind of timeline from there. And this is different than seeing the current moment as a kind of necessary drudgery to get somewhere better. And it's not to say that we have to, that everything that we're responsible for taking care of, all our little chores or whatever, are necessarily enjoyable by nature. But the way that we can be present with them can often make them really beautiful teachers and really expand the present moment into something that actually feels infinite. And so one thing that happened, I've been subtly rearranging my sense of fulfillment, taking it, rerouting it from it belonging in the past or belonging in the future to dropping into the now moment. This hasn't for me just been about being like mindful, though. There's been like other little shifts that I would name. So one was that I was feeling discontent about living in Portland because I want to live in Greece. I'm working toward, getting a digital nomad visa and living in Greece. And I became so excited about that possibility that I was kind of making Greece something in my mind and then Portland something else. Like, Portland is the bane of my existence now. I don't want to be here kind of thing. And I realized I went down into it, but I realized pretty quickly, like, this is kind of unbearable to feel this way about the place that I'm living, to think I'm stuck here, etc. So what I ended up doing was finding ways to actually just enjoy being here in the meantime. It's worked. I think I'm going to miss Portland a lot. But part of what happened was that I tuned in, I had these like series of Akashic vision meditations. So the Akashic records are a place of like infinite possibility and information, and you can go into them and channel, and it's quite life-changing. And this is a practice that I'll be sharing in this workshop Emergence that I'll talk about at the end of this video. But I asked the Akashic records, like, I tuned into this frequency that I really want in my life, a state that I've experienced at times, but haven't really always felt empowered to recreate. And I asked, like, how can I embody that now? And I was shown this really powerful vision of how that frequency lives inside of me and how I can just be it in any given moment. So I started to play with embodying that frequency. I started to root into doing things that I enjoy here in Portland. And I started to just create a life here that I'm actually enjoying. But then, this metaphor of like being in a transitional space, like I plan to leave and I thought I hated it here, but now I'm starting to just like really get into being here. I pulled this Bardo card in a book called Mysticism, book and oracle deck by Brynja Magnuson. And the Bardo is a space after death where, you've just died and your soul is moving into the next life. And the way it's described, I've heard and worked with the Bardo to some extent before in like spiritual teachings, but this was, it dropped and landed deeper for me when I was reading it this time. Bear with me, you all. I'm going to make connections to the transits and universalize things, but have some stories first. Anyways, the Bardo, the soul has passed and it's looking for its next life. And there's a way that if you stay focused on bliss, and this is what Brynja is describing in the book, if you stay focused on bliss during spaces of transition or chaos, you can end up finding like the next life that is meant for you, as opposed to when we kind of panic or get scared and try to take a really quick exit and it's like not really the one. So this whole idea of like staying open, focusing on bliss, even inside of the unknown or inside of transition, I started to play with this concept, and it was visiting in me in my dreams. But I was realizing that I'm kind of in this bardo of like, I'm leaving Portland and trying to go to Greece. And that it's helped me open up to Portland in this way that is giving me all of these teachings about death, right? Like, since I know I'm on my way out, Portland, I'm letting myself like really live it up here. Like, it channeled or like tapped me into the channel of Carpe Diem for Portland. And that was just a frequency. Like, it's Portland didn't change, my attitude did. And Virgo, again, being a mutable sign and a transitional sign. And again, like, I'm suggesting don't contract on life and think of it as drudgery before the next destination. Like, if you open inside of the routine or open inside of the chore, or even open inside of the difficult passage that you're not sure you want to be in, but is like part of the process that you're in, how much does that expand the possible timeline that you're on? So I think of this as a connection to Pluto in Capricorn, trine the new moon, right? That Pluto, it relates to these deep forces of life and death, of regeneration. It is related to, deep destruction and desire and creation. I guess just raw nature. And so if we're thinking about these little transitions that we're in as like a life or death portal, right? Not literal, but metaphorical. And what's our practice inside of transitions? What's our practice inside of intensity, right? What's our practice inside of really big emotions we'd prefer not to be having, or difficult experiences we'd prefer not to be having? Do we contract? Do we close? Do we have a lot of fear? Or do we find the potential bliss, awakening, consciousness, lucidity, etc., inside of them, wherever that we are? And then I think that this also adds in the trine to Taurus with the Jupiter-Uranus, the building conjunction of Jupiter, Uranus, and Taurus that trines the new moon and Pluto, where there's something about abundance and pleasure, right? And like Jupiter, Uranus, and Taurus could be these really big, like, wow, revelations about our relationship to our self-esteem, our embodiment, and our capacity to really receive, right? Our capacity to be grateful, to really open to life, and to like experience the good in life. Now, these are all like really sweet possibilities, but you can also think that Virgo could be where we tend to be anxious and stuck in the drudgery and like really kind of in crisis mode. And Pluto and Capricorn's where we're like feeling really bad about it and thinking that something is terribly wrong and like that it's our fault or it's someone else's fault. And then Uranus and Jupiter and Taurus is feeling incredibly scarce and like feeling like nothing's going to work out and the world is ending and like I'm not going to have enough, right? Like the grand trine could be working through that level of like ease of crisis and discontent. Or like, what's the other possibility here? Like that sense of when we're in the unknown, when we're in these transitional portals, why I thought the Bardo card was so inspiring, and this description of the Bardo from Brynja was like, if the unknown is a reason to be anxious and to kind of panic, that's, part of the frequency that you're like playing and relating to the situation with. If the unknown, you don't know where you're going, you don't know where the energy is taking you, but if you can open and find bliss inside of it, then maybe that is going to support you in getting to the next place on the map that you'd like to be. So this has been part of my living practice. How do I create connection, presence, and enjoyment? I've been thinking about how to create flow states more often than not. And I've also been tuning into places where I kind of have like empty calorie time, where I'm doing something that's kind of like collapsed, depressive even. And how can I reroute that energy to doing something that I know like creates flow or play or openness in my system? Or might I like study something, or like with astrology or study dance? Like I'm just kind of busy doing things that are creating flow states. And that's starting to create this like magical turbine between the like all of these transpersonal earth planets and the new moon. That's my vision of it anyway. So when I think about the Virgo new moon as part of this grand earth trine and the outer planets there, it literally does feel like flow states as routine. It feels like pulling oracle cards and having magical rituals. It feels like having some anxious or triggered activations here and there, right? Like Virgo has its crises. Uranus, Pluto, and Neptune are all transpersonal, so we can feel very flooded by their energies. We can feel a little bit electrocuted by Uranus. We can feel shredded by Pluto, and we can feel like completely dissolved by Neptune. Like they are beyond, right? So sometimes when we have these really big waves of sensation or feeling that feel like they kind of, they're bigger or vaster than our ego normally has the container for. So inside of those activations, this is where, like, if we have tools or practices around really being intimate with ourselves and being with our process, that we often can find these pathways to really integrating and alchemizing the material that comes up, learning from it, growing from it. But I could see that being part of this new moon, like these little activations or big activations. It could be the potential, or it feels like making a practice around our excitement rather than sweeping that under the rug. It feels like taking some time to do unpleasant chores or lean into some health adjustments, because we know these things free up stuck energy. And it feels like our various practices becoming a rich field of metaphors and downloads, right? So the magic, the beyond, the universe is not separate from all these little details, whether those details feel boring or whether those details feel even overwhelming at times. Where is our spiritual practice showing up in the 3D reality, in other words? So I want to highlight a few things about the outer planets and their relationship to the new moon in Virgo to consider. One is that Pluto and Capricorn has this really deep, bassy wrongness frequency. It's a deep unconscious impulse to punish the self or others for being bad. Right? There's more to Pluto and Capricorn than this, but this really was worth highlighting. You can imagine how this colludes with Virgo's sensitivity to detail and the slightest noticing of what's off. There may be places we are so ashamed and scared of this punisher and the stories that it has about us that we are actually unwilling to grow or evolve in our crafts. So craft can mean anything that we're working at improving. This is a part of us that cannot face critique and tries its hardest to not even be critiquable by either being perfect or not risking imperfection, right? Like not stepping outside of those comfort zones or being extremely diligent to do everything right to the point that it can feel suffocating. And the trine between the new moon and Pluto and Capricorn suggests both an ease of triggering this dynamic, feeling bad and wrong or feeling like we made a mistake, as well as integrating and loving it by having compassion for it. So this is tender work we do around letting ourselves make mistakes by even trying things out of our comfort zone, as well as learn from our mistakes, like finding the gems, being curious and being engaged, making adjustments if needed, taking responsibility if needed, but not having to punish, like really just being able to kind of look at things in a cold and dry, like factual or like that's interesting kind of way, but not like this deeply problematic, like this is the worst thing ever, this means something about me kind of way. And then Jupiter, Uranus, and Taurus could be suggesting a whole revolution in self-worth that feels very unique or new to us in some way, like we're unfolding or undoing some of the beliefs or programming we have around what makes us worthy or not. As this relates to the rest of the grand earth trine with Pluto and Capricorn and the new moon in Virgo, there may be some places we are relating to ourselves that were distinctly off limits before, right? Like we're covering new territory of how we can be in relationship to abundance, to receptivity, and to softening within ourselves, right? Like it's hard to really be receptive within Taurus in the spaces that we are resentful or feel like unworthy or unlovable, right? And so those might be kind of these like places that we don't even want to visit or bring life to or be with. But when we start to let ourselves be with that material instead of judging it and let it open, then there's like this whole new world of what it's like to be integrated with that part of ourselves that we used to condemn or just like not have any space to contact before. And there's also some focus on coming down to earth or coming back down into the body, even if we're also traversing, these mythic or intellectual or spiritual or conceptual realms that may be helping us orient or see the map of where to go. But the earth signs can get very practical. Sometimes we have this idea, this idealism, the heaven, if you will, the afterlife of where we should be, like who we should be. And we neglect or kind of miss the in-between or the right here, right now, what's under our nose kind of thing, right? We avoid those spots. We have judgment of them. We avoid being intimate with ourselves there because we think we should be somewhere else. And we relate, as though we are in that other place. And the difference, though, is that if we come down and touch root with where we actually are and let ourselves actually be in relationship and in connection with ourselves here, then we give ourselves the power to actually move from where we are. This creates presence, and presence is power to be in creativity and to affect change, right? And so if we're too kind of like out in fantasy about where we think we should be, we're not like close to the ground about like where we actually have space to move and to create. So we might think about, what that is for you. Sometimes these things are actually quite hard to see. It's very unconscious that we're doing that. But it's where we just are not in approval and not in acceptance of where we're at. And so we can't even see ourselves there. We see ourselves somewhere else. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. So these are the last few days to sign up for Emergence. This is a visionary workshop series that I'm offering about the lunar nodes in Aries and Libra, South Node in Libra, North Node in Aries. We're going to be having eclipses along this axis starting in October. And so I created this workshop series as a pre-eclipse season offering to understand what these nodes are doing in general in the transit, but really how they're falling in your chart and how they're speaking to you. So I'm going to be teaching, we're going to do Akashic journeying so you can channel your own gnosis, and I will be offering personal feedback about how the nodes are touching your chart. If you resonate with my forecasts and the things that I share, I really invite you to come study with me personally. I create these forecasts to basically send out the signal to like-minded people who resonate. And one of my favorite things to do actually is teach and to work with my students and clients and to offer this bridge where you can develop your own astrological literacy and your own creativity, right? I've supported people in first just becoming fluent in astrology and being able to speak the language and see it happening all around them. But I also support people going deeper into how that muses and touches your life, how you're creative with it. So if you love my work, I really encourage you to come study with me more directly. Emergence is a 4-week experience specific to the lunar nodes and these eclipses. But I'm also offering Diviner, which is housing the Evolutionary Astrology Intensive for its 12th run. This is a 4-month program to learn the language and fluency of evolutionary astrology, which is astrology from the perspective of your soul and its ongoing evolution, right? What is your soul really learning in this life? What are the kind of historical trends and patterns your soul has brought in from prior lives? And how is that something that the container of this present incarnation is the perfect alchemical training ground for working with that material and continuing your evolution? This form of astrology, I feel, is really a wisdom school. It's guided me so much in deepening into my life and deepening into really being here on earth, right? From bringing all of my upper chakra, like psychic visionary wisdom, like down into how I live in a day-to-day way and how I create a life that reflects, these realms that I feel so deeply connected with. The Evolutionary Astrology Intensive happens inside of Diviner. Diviner is a extended year-long container where there's new classes year-round to deepen and expand what we learn in the intensive. I did this because I've been teaching advanced alumni programs for the last few years. And we traveled so far. We had such amazing visionary experiences in class together that I wanted to send the upgrade back to the original intensive. So you get this 4-month experience of like really being initiated into speaking the language. I welcome also practitioners or people who are farther along. This class has seen all levels. And then we deepen throughout the year, practicing those things, learning new things, and just really growing our fluency and intuition as astrologers. For Emergence, you can click the link in the notes to sign up. But for Diviner, I now also added a application that you can click the link to in the notes. There's a few scholarship spaces if you want to apply for that. And then you can otherwise also email me, Sabrina@monarchastrology.com, with your interest in Diviner. And we can just get on a call. If you fill out the application, though, I'm also getting on calls with people to talk about Diviner and see if it's a fit for you. So I will leave it here. Again, leave a comment. Let me know what resonated with you. And I hope that you have a beautiful new moon and find the magic in your everyday.